Welcome to Oh Hell No with Nicole.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Oh Hell No podcast. Today we have Dr. Marilyn Singleton. She is an anesthesiologist and she is also a lawyer. So welcome, Dr. Singleton. Thank you for being here.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So when did you realize you wanted to become a doctor?
When I was a young girl, my father was a doctor. My grandfather, whom I never knew, my mother's father, was also a doctor, a small town doctor in Ohio. And we just grew up hearing my father talk to patients and go out on house calls. How old-fashioned is that?
Mm-hmm.
And it just seemed like I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Nice. That's amazing. So what do you love the most about what you do as a doctor?
It's the patients. Patients are so interesting. And the idea that you can talk to people, and I usually see them when they're at their most vulnerable, and you feel like you can really, really change their life by making them feel safe and comfortable and that they know everything's going to be all right. It's really a wonderful feeling. And at the end of whatever procedure there is, you can see that the patient is healthy and woke up just fine, and you know they're going to be fine, and nothing feels better.
Yeah, I love doctors, especially a really good doctor. Like, I'll travel far for a good doctor. I feel like you guys are specially picked by God. Like, you know what I mean? Because you just have all these great skills that allow you to, be a doctor. Because not anyone can just be a doctor. I'm sorry. You just can't.
Well, I think it takes really wanting to do it. And I just look at things. Everybody has their own place in this world. And the most important thing is to find where you belong. And then that way you can just be really good at what you do. I think the worst thing that can happen to anybody is to get pushed into something that they don't really want to do, because then they'll never be really super at it.
Yes, that's very true. Very, very true. So, what is the most difficult part of being an anesthesiologist?
I think the hard part these days is all the patients are coming in as outpatients, or they just come in the morning of admission. So you don't really get that much of a chance to talk to them beforehand. And it was sort of a scary thing when they started doing that. It used to be you'd go in and see the patient the evening before when they were admitted to the hospital and had a chance to feel like they could get some confidence in you. And now you kind of go in there and a nurse had seen them in the pre-op clinic the day before, and you say, "Hi, I'm Dr. Singleton, and I'm going to put you to sleep today." And you just think, why should this person trust me? They met me for 3 minutes.
Right.
And so it's really trying to engender some trust and confidence in a very short period of time.
So, for people who don't know, who've never had surgery, can you kind of explain, quickly, high level, like what part you play in the, in the operating room and how your day would flow?
Okay. Generally speaking, you go in first thing in the morning, very early, and depending on what the case is that you have to do, whether it's one that requires a lot of preparation because you're going to do a lot of special monitoring on the patient, you can go in as early as 5 o'clock in the morning to start preparing. And then you collect up the patient and get their IVs in and all that sort of stuff, and go to the operating room. And usually in the operating room, you have different surgeons. Sometimes you'll be with the same surgeon all day, but usually you'll do one patient for one person, and then it might be another person that you're doing it for. So you kind of have to change your style for each person. And some surgeons have different things that they'd like, different requests. Like some want you to put in an anesthetic that lasts for a long time after the surgery's over. So even though the patient wakes up, you put in some sort of local anesthetic that'll keep them numb in that area, like their shoulder or their knee or whatever, for 24 hours. So that way the person won't need pain medicine. So there's all these other things that go on. It's kind of not like you just shove in a syringe full of medicine, they fall asleep and then wake back up. And while they are asleep, you just have to keep them. You like to keep patients asleep enough so they don't feel anything, but awake enough where they don't get what we call an anesthesia too deep, where you feel like the bodily functions will start to slow down. So you try to keep people where their metabolism and everything is just as much like when they're awake, but their brain is asleep so they don't feel the surgery.
Wow. See? Amazing. So, has there ever been a time where you felt like leaving the medical field?
Well, there was this piece of me that always wanted to learn about the law. And it's an interesting question because I never felt I really wanted to leave medicine, but more that I wanted to expand my knowledge. And so while I was working in the operating room, I was fortunate enough that Berkeley Law School was literally right down the street. And I was able to get in law school there. So I went to law school, and I had already been practicing for several years, quite a few years when I did that. And I'm very glad I did. I have been able to use that knowledge. So it wasn't just a waste where, I'll just do this for fun. And I've always continued to see patients. So it's a hard thing. It's a big problem now, the so-called physician burnout, which is happening at a higher pace because just the way with electronic medical records and all sorts of government burdens that they've now put on, that a lot of doctors feel like they're just becoming secretaries and not doctors. What I do now, which is I try to do pain management without heavy pain medications. So I do injections and things to treat pain locally so people won't have to be on drugs. Now, my patients pay me in cash, credit card cash. And then if they have insurance, then they bill the insurance and they have to deal with all that. So I don't have an insurance biller in the office, but people who do it kind of the usual way, they end up having to hire two people to be in the office, to be on the phone all day with the insurance companies trying to get approval, or the Medicare people trying to get approval to do the procedure.
Yeah.
And, and it's very frustrating. I had a patient once who needed a series of nerve blocks for this condition that some people get where you just have very, very bad nerve pain after you've had a minor injury. The original injury goes away, but you have this terrible pain afterwards. And somebody developed this protocol that really worked where you gave 10 nerve blocks in a row. The patient had to come in every day, including weekends, and they'd get a nerve block. And what it does is kind of send the nerve a different signal where it says, okay, I'm not going to fire off anymore. And so she had Medicaid. And so I sent in the authorization to Medicaid, and they kept on saying, well, we'll authorize you to do 3. And I kept on going back and saying, but 3 doesn't work. It's 10 you have to do. It was so frustrating. This poor patient ended up having to wait 6 months by the time I argued with these people that, they'd say, do 3 and then have her come back and see if she's any better. And I'm saying it doesn't work that way.
It's so ridiculous.
I sent them the papers, the scientific papers, the whole thing. And, so that kind of stuff is very crazy, very frustrating. And if doctors are seeing 30 patients in a day, that kind of thing doesn't do well. It really starts to wear people down.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, I have insurance. I pay insurance every month through my employer. And last year I had this health scare and I was referred to the specialist and I had to, get a PET scan done. And I'm here, waiting to get this, test done, which could determine, which way my life was going to go. And they were telling me, oh, well, we have to get an authorization and that could take some time. Meanwhile, I've got swollen lymph nodes in my stomach. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, my doctor is telling you she needs this PET scan. Like, can't you just make it happen? I pay my insurance every month. Like, isn't this what it's for? It was so
Right.
ridiculous. Yeah. So,
This is a very big frustration. This is one reason that a lot of doctors, and it's something that's rising and rising and rising out there in the community and at all levels of patients, from poor to rich, where there's healthcare sharing ministries and doctors called direct primary care physicians, where they charge $40 a month per person and everything is taken care of.
wow.
And in most states, there's only a couple of states where doctors can't sell medicines, but most states they can. And they will sell the medicine to the patient at cost, or if it's a really cheap medicine, they just give it to them for free as part of the $40 a month. And what amazes me, Nicole, is when you buy medicines as a wholesale person and see how incredibly cheap some of these medicines are. And then when your patient comes in and says, well, I got that at the pharmacy and they charged me $70. And I'm like, what? This bottle of pills cost me $3.50.
That's insane.
It is insane. And there's so much stuff that goes on in the health so-called system that people don't even know about that raises those costs. And it's when you do it where you're just like shopping and going direct to somebody, and just like when people buy a car direct from person versus going through a dealer, that same used car is going to cost practically twice as much because there's all these extra fees. And that's how they do with the medications, because they're paying all the people who shuffle the paperwork. And it's crazy. Because my big goal is you want people to realize that you can pay less for really good medical care.
Right. Yeah, it's really crazy. So with that being said, what kind of law did you study when you went to law school?
I studied constitutional law and administrative law. So I really wanted to know how laws are made, and when people say, "Oh, that's my constitutional right,"
Right.
I really wanted to know what rights were, what the limits are of rights, and how the court decides. Most things they do something called a balancing test, where you balance the person's personal right against the state's need to control a right, and usually the person wins, fortunately. And because that was the whole point of the Constitution, to make sure that we had personal rights and that the king stopped bossing us around.
hmm So, do you practice law today?
No, I don't. I do some consulting, but it's really very small. And I use what I learned in law school when I write papers and stuff about healthcare policy, that from what I learned about how things work, how laws are made, and which it's almost like you don't even want to know, and how the system works. How, and this is what's so scary. People might hear that a law is passed, but that's such a small part of it. Then the department that governs the law has to write regulations to tell people how you make the law work. And sometimes it takes 3 years for them to write them. I remember when the law came out in 1992 that said health insurance cards and Medicare cards could not have Social Security numbers on them, since you were flashing them around everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the private insurance people, it took them a few years and they got the Social Security numbers off of insurance cards. But it's just this year, if you can believe it, that Medicare finally took the Social Security numbers off Medicare cards.
That's crazy. Oh my
I mean,
gosh.
the people who needed it most, these are old people,
Right.
the ones who are so vulnerable. It,
Yes.
it's, oh, sometimes it's crazy.
Oh my goodness gracious. That's, oh God, I don't know. I just can't take it. I really can't. So, tell us about something that you wrote. It's entitled "The Courage to Trust Medical Care to Patients and Physicians."
Well, what that's about and what made me write it was all the talk that goes back and forth about healthcare systems and how this works and how that works and how many people can you get to um, be involved, and all the middlemen involved between the doctor and the patient. And I was just like, we have to go back to the old days where writing laws isn't about Congress people trying to smart mouth so they sound smart. It's about trying to get medical care to the patients. And one of the big bugaboos some of us in the whole healthcare policy world talk about, it's not healthcare, it's medical care. That healthcare is kind of global and we're trying to take care of people's health and make sure they get their shots and don't get STDs and all that sort of thing. And then there's a level of healthcare that depends on us as individuals, not to smoke, not to drink too much, not to do bad lifestyle choices. And then there's the medical care, like you're mentioning, that doctors who went to school and learned how to diagnose diseases and how to help patients out. That's what we want to do. We don't want to do all that other stuff. And we want to have a one-on-one patient-doctor relationship without a whole bunch of electronic medical records and things where privacy could be invaded. That's one of the things when I was working in a fancy area, I'll say, in the 80s, and cocaine was very popular. And I would never take a chart in there and write down notes in front of the patient because I wanted them to tell me whether they were doing drugs. And people tend to lie. And one of the things people complain about, not to mention that you have to do a lot of secretarial work with electronic records, but psychiatrists in particular and addiction people, patients don't want to tell you, and I don't blame them. They see you typing into a computer, and we all know how the computer never forgets, and you're going to tell them, oh yeah, I did this many drugs or that many drugs, and we really need to know the truth. And Psychiatrists, my goodness, they're just having fits because patients are afraid to tell the deep, dark secrets, and that's what makes psychiatry work. So there's a lot of things that change in that good old-fashioned doctor-patient relationship when you have too many fingers in the pie. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
there's whole groups of us that are just trying to get all the extra fingers out of the pie and encourage people, if they can, to get involved with cash-friendly practices or these direct care practices. One of my friends has a wonderful clinic in New Jersey. It's called the Zarapath Clinic. And Alita takes Medicaid, but she mostly tries to do cash care. And she has her patients who don't have any money pay her back in working around the office. And yeah, it's good because she has some people who had never had a job until she had them work in the office. And then they were able to go out and get a job because they could say, yeah, I did such and such. I filed papers. You know how a lot of times that's all people want is that one thing they can say that they did, that they didn't just sleep in every day and do nothing. So there's a lot of good social things that come out of that, and encouraging people to be active participants in their own health. And that makes people feel like they want to be active participants in society and not stay marginalized.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, why are you so passionate about this topic? Is it just from your experience as a doctor, or maybe your colleagues, or just the passion inside of you that wanted to, find out more about law and the fact that you are a doctor? Like, what do you think, makes you so interested? Because some doctors like just come in, do their jobs, and that's it. Like, oh, well, you know what I mean?
Well, that's true. And well, some people, and it is funny because we all know, I look at you, you're such a good talker and everything, that I would think, gee, wouldn't it be awful if you had some job where you were in a cubicle and could never talk to anybody all day? That wouldn't be you. And there's some doctors who are kind of like that. They're very scientific, and that they're more like engineers personality wise, and that's what's so great about having different specialties, and you hope people pick the right specialty for their personality. That like pathologists are people who kind of like to be alone because they do work alone most of the time, and other people like to be with people, and other people love to talk to patients. And this is the other frustrating thing, it used to be doctors saw around 20 patients a day, and now with these new systems that are buying out private practices where the doctor doesn't have much say, they just troop patients in one after another, and they're seeing 30 some patients a day, plus working on charts after the end of the day when you've seen patients. And that's no way to have a good attitude. And so I just think with me, it was kind of all of the above. As I see the doctor-patient relationship start to get torn apart, really, and not like, you're probably too young, you can't remember Marcus Welby, and I don't think they have reruns on TV, but this was a show in the 60s, maybe early 70s, and he was your family doctor, and his nurse Consuelo would solve problems if he couldn't solve the problem, and he did everything for his patients, and his patients loved him, and that's the sort of doctor I think a lot of people think about when they think they want to go to a doctor, and not a technician, not a robot. And as we see all this robot stuff That's not what patients want.
Yeah, it's crazy. The only thing that I do like is that you can now have your doctor call you back or FaceTime you. I forget what they call it.
Yes.
Everybody has like a different system or name for it or whatever.
Mhm.
But for like
The
little
telehealth or telemedicine.
exactly. I like that because sometimes you have just like a small thing like a UTI. You kind of know your
Mhm.
UTI symptoms, and you just need to go pick up some medicine and go to work. So I like that in a
Mhm.
sense, but I like to also go in and see the doctor. And it drives me crazy when I go to the doctor and they have to type all this stuff in. I feel like I'm at the
Yes.
airport booking a flight, when they like type like
Yes.
typing.
And imagine that's how the doctors feel. But the thing is, see, having a good relationship with the doctor is one of the things that makes it so you can call in and get a prescription for something, because not only do they know science-wise what's wrong with you, but they know that you're a reliable patient,
Mhm.
because some patients we could discharge from the hospital fairly early after their procedure, because you knew they had solid people at home to help take care of them, that they had food in their refrigerator, and if they were in bed, there was someone who could help them get to the bathroom. There's other patients who have none of that. They have no backup. And then you take it really bad all the way down, then you have homeless people who, it's sad, but you have to keep them in the hospital because they can't go out on the street. Their wound is never going to heal on the street. And so there's a lot of other decisions and societal factors that go in to even how you practice your medicine.
Yeah, it must be really difficult. Um, wow. So, where do you think healthcare is headed in this country?
I tell you, that is such a huge question. There's some people that say, oh, we should have the government pay for everything. And it sounds really good until you see that everybody's taxes would have to go up almost 100%, everybody's,
Mm.
because they talk about having payroll tax increase, having excise taxes on things, and saying, oh, and we'll tax the rich too. But then you say, well, what's the definition of the rich? And suddenly you realize it's not that rich. It's like
Mhm.
$60,000 a year that somebody struggled to try to make. And then you think, well, if they take all my taxes and put it in a big pot and give it to the government, and they're going to dole it out and give it to hospitals, doctors, whomever to take care of you, how much choice are you going to have in how you're taken care of? Probably not very much. And that's the balance. And it's one of those things that sounds good until you start to pick it apart and see some of the problems. And we're Americans. And let's face it, Americans love their choice. We like freedom, we like liberty, and there's no way around it. Americans don't like to be told what to do. And uh, I think people would be sorry if they said, oh, yeah, sounds like a good idea, let's try it, because once that ever happened, it wouldn't go back. And that we've seen that with many, many programs that start and they say, oh, this is supposed to be temporary, it's supposed to be a test, and then it never goes away.
So, how is it that some countries are able to offer healthcare in that way, like, Canada and I don't know, some places in Europe?
Mhm.
Like, how are they
Well,
able to do that?
there's a couple things involved. Okay, first, in Canada, they do that, and there's different stories. I've had patients from Canada that swear on the American system that they rather pay a little more but get instant treatment. One lady's husband had malignant melanoma, the cancerous mole, and he was told in Canada he had to wait 4 months for surgery. And he was a visiting professor here, and he went to the doctor, and they said, "Oh my goodness, you should get this operated on right away." And he was operated on the next day. And, and you think, okay, that's one case. But even when the Canadian Prime Minister a few years back came across the border to New York to get his heart surgery,
That's great.
that kind of makes you wonder. But a lot of it is cultural. I have a girlfriend that moved to Canada for 10 years, and she said the biggest thing she noticed with Canadians is that they still have kind of a colonial mentality. And she said, like at the grocery store, if they don't have something, the grocery store owner will say, "Oh, ma'am, we'll get it for you right away." Well, Jan said, well, 3 months later, that's when they got the product.
Wow.
So Americans right away is not the same as Canadians right away. So there's cultural differences. And
Yeah.
then, like in Japan, and this is something a lot of people don't know, that they have real closeness with family, and whether you hate your family or not, you still take care of your family. And when people go in the hospital, there a family member is with them, and the family member does some nursing care, and nurses give out medicines, but they really depend on the family. And so Americans tend to, when they have a family member that's sick, really, unless it's their kid, they kind of dump granny off at the hospital and then say, "Oh, good, now somebody else is taking care of her." So we've got, it's just interesting culturally. And of course, Americans want a lot and they want it now. And that's what costs. And this is the hard thing to get up over, is how do you maintain choice, and how do you do it at a price without taxing people out of existence? Um, some countries like Switzerland, they have mandatory insurance, but the government doesn't pay for it. People just have to buy insurance. And so people still have their choice of insurance policies. In other countries, it is the government who's the insurer. And and when they talk about Sweden and Denmark and Finland, one thing again, America is so different. Those are very homogeneous societies. People are kind of all the same, and in America, look at how different we all are. And
Yeah.
and we have such an amazing difference of issues and medical problems. And so it's not quite as simple as it sounds when you pull everything together.
Hmm. Yeah, when you break it down like that. The only thing though is I just don't understand where this money goes. Now let me tell you, this is my oh hell no moment that I had.
Mhm.
So I switched jobs. I got a new job offer, which I was very excited about. And so I switched insurance. I had to get the different insurance or whatever. And with my old employer, I had flex
Mhm.
spending. I always get flex spending because my husband thinks I'm a hypochondriac, but I'm really not. I just pay for my health care and I'm gonna use it. So if
Good
I'm
for you.
if I don't feel good, I'm going to the doctors. I'm sorry. So, I had like this flex spending, and I didn't realize that I should have like used it up because I was switching jobs or whatever. So I had like $700 left. So they shut off my card like the day that I would my last day of my old job.
Mhm.
And I called them to say, hey, well, I thought, how much money do I have left? They're like, oh, you have like $700 left, and you have until March of 2019 to use the $700, but it has to be on medical charges that occurred before your last day.
Mhm.
Now, I'm like, this is my damn money, okay? They took this out of my check every month to put it aside for me and my medical expenses. Why
Mhm.
do I have to use it on stuff prior to my last day? Why can't I use it on whatever I want to use it on, meaning like medical related stuff? why are they telling me what I could do with my money? And if I don't have any medical bills that I can use it on prior to the date that they're telling me, what happens to my $700? And this happened to me a couple of years ago, and it was like $1,500. So
Well,
where,
that's very interesting because health savings accounts, when a lot of this just depends on how the employer set it up, because in general, health savings accounts are supposed to be portable. They're supposed to be yours. And in fact, insurers that are encouraging them because they sell these high deductible health plans, so they want you to have a health savings account, have shown numbers that if you keep your health savings account, and most people don't use all of it every year, and save it and save it and save it, you could have up to $300,000 in it by the time you get old and might actually have to use it. So unfortunately, I don't know what the contract or however your job worked that out, but there's plenty of people whose rolls over. Now, in Congress, they have some laws now that they're trying to pass to make all of them that way, where they can be rolled over and it will always be yours. So there's a lot of internal revenue code changes that they're trying to make sure that what happened to you doesn't happen anymore.
well,
And I hope they pass, but it's a tough road.
yeah.
When I was examining these laws, I thought, well, this should be an easy sell, but amazingly, it split along party lines, and the Democrats didn't want the laws to pass because they said that was tax money that was withheld from social programs. So, there are two ways of looking at it. And the Republicans said the money's the people's money and they should have it, and don't punish them and get tax savings from someplace else for other social welfare programs. So this is again, I'm talking about, how laws are made and
Right.
all the give and take and how crazy it is, that because the health savings account money, straight health savings accounts, is yours.
Yeah,
And
it's happened to me more than once, right? So, and I'm sure if it's just me, I'm sure a lot of people have experienced this. And my question is, where is that money going? And it just really irritates me because, you put that money aside for your health stuff, and you should be able to use that until it's depleted for anything health related. As long as it's paying a health bill, you should be able to use that money. I don't care if it was 2016. You should be able to pay your health bill with that. It's ridiculous. But
and I say that's how the majority of health savings accounts should be set up. But
yeah.
again, depending on the employer's ERISA rules and all this other stuff, you kind of have to know the ins and outs to be able to give, it's obviously I can't really give a specific answer on that. But
Yeah, no. I just wanted to
it's a
share.
sort of thing. No, I'm glad you threw it out there because there is all this legislation that's trying to change it. They're trying to increase the amount that you can put into it, increase it up to 6,900, so people can really save. I had written an article once because I was upset at how quickly they were putting people into hospice care and taking them out of the hospital. And I wrote an article called "A Health Savings Account Could Save Your Life," and was encouraging people to save as much as you can on your own, because there might be a time when they say, sorry, we're not going to give you any more care. And you want to be in the position to say, but I want more care. Now, some people don't, but some people do.
Right.
And you can never tell. This is one thing I tell people all the time if they want to kind of sign their life away, is how you feel now at the age of 45 is not going to be how you're going to feel when you're 75.
Yeah, absolutely.
Life becomes more precious when it gets closer to being taken away. So it's important for us to look out for our own futures.
So when you write these articles, where do they get published?
Well, for start, the organization that I belong to, the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, there we always start them on our website, and then they get sent out to news media. And I guess that's how you first saw one of my articles. And I think they send them out to about 3,000 various outlets.
Mm-hmm.
And then people publish them. They just email back to the person who handles that. And, we always give permission to publish. And then that's how I feel lucky enough to get on shows like yours. Some are health shows, all different kinds of shows. And because they've read the article, and it raised, whether they agree with everything I say or not, it doesn't matter. I think it's just good for these issues to be raised and have people think about it. And I think just because of our conversation about your Flex account, it's going to make people pay more attention when they do have these jobs.
Yeah,
And
definitely. And let
upfront, thorough explanations, etc. But most people don't know, Nicole. They just don't know.
yeah, it's true.
And
And I
you're
got
luckier than most, even in the sense because you do interview people, you probably meet more different kinds of people than most people have a chance to meet. And imagine if you get bamboozled, how the poor average Joe on the street is going to.
Yeah, and I get bamboozled because of my own negligence because like I said, it happened to me before and I thought I was a step ahead this time, but I just got so much stuff going on. Like sometimes things slip, you know, and I get caught out there. But let me give you guys another tidbit. So there is a flex spending store online that is everything that you buy there is approved and you can use your flex spending account to purchase things from this website, and they have all sorts of things like thermometers, wheelchairs, if you need like a blood pressure kit, anything that's medical related. You can go to this FSA, I think it's like fsa.com or something like that, the flex spending account website, and you can purchase things. So if you're coming to the coming up to the end of the year and you haven't spent all the money in your flex spending account and you have the type of account that does not carry over, just go to that website and stock up on things that you need, So that's a little tidbit.
That's a very good tidbit because there are a lot of things that aren't perishable that you can hang on to. And that's the other thing as far as scheduling appointments, whether it's dental related things or all sorts of things that you think of, that kind of start making sure to give a kind of an inventory in your own mind around October. What are things I might need?
Yep.
When is my mammogram due? And all these sorts of things. Just kind of start ticking off those things and even keep a little calendar that says, okay, let me spend this money if I have any left. And because I'm so glad you pointed out that website, because there's a lot of things that these accounts can pay for. And
Yes.
I'm so glad they restored that, because for a while when the ACA first came out, they took those things away.
Yes,
and I'm glad
they did. I remember that too.
Yeah, because they wanted to save tax money, but people were up in arms.
Mm-hmm.
People had gotten so used to being able to buy over the counter.
Right.
And the thing that bothered me is which was so silly, because you couldn't use it to buy over the counter, let's say Benadryl over the counter. People were asking for prescriptions, which cost 7 times as much as buying Rite Aid's generic Benadryl, just because the HSA account didn't pay for it anymore. And it's like, hold the phone here.
Mm-hmm.
We've changed this law and made it where now people are wasting healthcare dollars rather than conserving them.
Exactly. So guys, I'll put that in the show notes so you can have the website. I'll put that in there so you can just, know exactly where to go. So, what do you sacrifice personally to do all that you do? Because, honey, you do a lot.
Well, certainly when I was younger, and there were times I felt like I was sacrificing my youth when people I'd gone to college with who got jobs outside of college were already working and they were going out to dinner in the evening, and I was sleeping in the hospital on call. I was on call every other night, every other weekend, and that meant every other night, every other weekend I spent in the hospital eating hideous hospital food and staying up all night taking care of folks. And then, so I think your life gets put on hold for anywhere from 4 to 7 years during the residency. And then when that's finished, you kind of have to get started. So life kind of goes on hold a little bit. And like one of the teachers I had once, we were talking about having kids, and she just said, well, remember, your kids are more than just a decoration. So you have to figure out how to have your child work within your work life and, and still feel like you're a good mother, yet still working. So there was a lot of trade-off back and forth with that. And certainly now, as I have more control over my time, since I do office type things, I really feel like, and I know this is going to sound corny, but I don't feel like it's a sacrifice. Maybe my husband doesn't get dinner on time every time if I'm right in the middle of something, but
Right.
beyond that, it just makes me feel good to take care of people and to write stuff and help people out, and hope, like, even on the show, if somebody learns one thing, then I've done my job.
Absolutely. When you wake up every day, what do you look forward to doing the most?
Probably feeding the dogs because they're so cute.
That's sweet. That's
I
sweet.
hope my husband didn't hear that. I guess
Right. Not feeding him.
it's funny that every year, sometimes when I wake up in the morning, I really do have to say, well, thank God I woke up.
Mm-hmm.
And more, I'm kind of getting like that. One of my colleagues, her husband did not wake up in the morning. She woke up and he was dead.
Oh
And
my
I'll never
gosh.
forget that. And he was not old. And so it gave me, it's kind of one of those moments where you think, wow, at any time, your minutes on this earth could be over. So
Mm-hmm.
you just have to make the most of it.
Yeah, I agree. I do that too. When I wake up, I always say a little prayer saying, like, thank God I woke up. Now, hopefully, I can walk. Because you never know. Just because you woke up, it doesn't mean everything's working.
That's right.
So, what are you the most proud of when you look back at all that you've accomplished?
Well, again, corny as it may be, I raised a really good son, and he just turned out to be a really good young man. And so I'm definitely very proud of that. And the other thing, I can think back to uh, various cases I've done and some lives where I can honestly say I really saved that person's life. I mean, they were dying, they were dead, and I helped bring them back to life. And those are the moments you just never forget.
That's great. And it's not corny because it's not easy being a mom. So if you raise a child that you can be proud of, that is something worth shouting at the top of your lungs because we do not know what we're getting. It's like a box of chocolates. So, hats off to you and your hubby. So, what is your definition of success?
I would say feeling at the end of the day, and I have to say this is modified for me. I used to think in a little bit longer terms, but certainly if at the end of the day you feel like you were a decent person, and not that you had to go out and save the world, but that you did at least one good thing that day that made you feel good or made somebody else feel good.
Amazing. So this is the Oh Hell No podcast, and usually I ask guests to share their Oh Hell No moment. It could be something old, something recent. I shared an Oh Hell No moment with you, so you kind of know what an Oh Hell No moment is. It's really where you just stop and say, oh, hell no, why? you know? And we have these moments all the time, but some stand out more than others. So would you please share your Oh Hell No moment?
Oh, tell you. I I don't know that there's one that's totally mortifying, but I can't say it on the radio.
Okay.
But I will tell one. When I was an intern, I was the only woman in my internship class, and there was this visiting plastic surgeon who was giving us a lecture on whatever, and it was mostly, he was just some sort of arrogant type, and there was a coffee pot in the room, and he was looking around like he wanted a cup of coffee, and then he gazed his eyes over at me, and I looked up at him, and I just said, I don't do coffee.
I love those stories.
And it's so funny because the guys in the room were thinking, oh, well, she just got herself a bad grade. She'll never do surgery again. And, it's like, but sometimes you have to just open your mouth and not care.
Absolutely. Because I think that's always the case. They always think that we're supposed to be doing like stuff like that, Like, no, not today, buddy. Well, it was such a pleasure talking to you today. You shared some great information, and I hope that everyone listening has learned something. I know that I have. I want to ask you, when are you writing a book? Come on, put this stuff in a book.
Believe me, I've been sitting down, and my husband keeps on saying, okay, it's time for you to stop pulling that stuff together. And I said, oh, but if I don't do it now, it may never happen. So bit by bit, it's certainly not like the movies where you sit down and say, oh, I think I'll write a book. And then by the end of the half-hour show, you've produced this wonderful piece.
No, it takes time. I know. I've had a lot of authors on, and it's no easy task. But when it's done, it's worth it. So get to work.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for coming on the podcast. Do you have any like websites or any place where people can go and read some of your articles just in case they want to read up on what you've written?
Okay, aapsonline.org, and they have what's new. It's a kind of very busy website, and it's got resources, what's new, and all that sort of stuff. But my name is a crossover on the side with a bunch of names and topics, and you can just click it on, and you can learn about topics. They have a whole list of a couple thousand doctors around the country who take cash and will let you pay what you can afford. And so they keep a list of all those and their numbers. So there's a lot of resources on the website, including articles by me and some of my other colleagues.
Okay, that's great. I'm sure that's a great resource. So people, I will be putting that in the show notes as well so that you can get the information you need to stay healthy.